Have you ever felt just this incredibly intense drive to build something, like to create or to organize a project, but it feels like the external world is just throwing up brick walls in front of you?
Yeah, that's a really common feeling.
I mean, whether it is a stalled career path or an industry that just feels actively hostile to your vision,
Right, right.
or even just a culture that flat out refuses to accept your ideas. It is a deeply, profoundly frustrating experience. You just have all this energy and absolutely nowhere to put it.
It really is. It's actually one of the most agonizing states a human being can experience,
Hmm.
largely because it directly violates our underlying biological imperative.
The best way I can describe it is like having a high-performance engine, maybe a massive V8, and you are just redlining it.
Oh yeah, perfect analogy.
You have the pedal to the floor, completely revving the engine, but the car is stuck in neutral. That kinetic energy has to go somewhere, right? If it doesn't translate into forward momentum, the heat and the friction are literally going to tear the machine apart.
Exactly. That analogy perfectly captures what the writer Elias Kunis calls a T plus, or metamorphic
Copy that.
system.
A metamorphic system.
Yeah. And for today's deep dive, we are exploring an essay he wrote called The Spore Strategy. Our mission today is to answer a surprisingly profound question.
Which is?
What is the mathematically and biologically optimal way to channel your growth-oriented energy when the external world refuses to accept it?
Right, because, you can't just flip a switch and turn off your ambition.
You absolutely cannot. In the framework Kunis outlines, a 2 plus system is fundamentally driven to create organized complexity.
Organized complexity.
Yeah, the scientific term for this is negentropy. So if entropy is the universe's tendency to degrade into chaos and messiness, negentropy is the opposite force.
So it's like the drive to build order.
Precisely.
Hmm.
To synthesize, to create structure out of chaos. Kunis argues that certain people and even certain organizations are wired with this metamorphic drive.
Okay, so we're going to explore how biology actually solved this exact blocked engine problem, right? Like
Yeah.
billions of years ago, and how you can apply this biological blueprint to your own life and work right now.
We are. But before we get to the biological solution, we should probably look at the car crash.
Right, yeah. We need to talk about what happens when people inevitably choose the wrong ways to deal with that external resistance,
Yeah.
because we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely.
You face a wall, and human nature usually dictates one of three reactions. And, well, all of them are a complete disaster for your T-plus engine.
They really are. Kunis outlines these three naive responses, pointing out that they are thermodynamically invalid when your external ports, meaning your avenues to interface with the outside world, are blocked.
So what's the first one?
The first naive response is to just force it anyway. This is the person who just keeps smashing their head against the brick wall.
Oh, man, we see this all the time. Think of, like, the startup founder who's burning through venture capital, trying to force a product onto a market that simply does not want it.
Yes, exactly that.
Or the middle manager trying to push an innovative project through a corporate bureaucracy that is, built entirely to reject new ideas.
And the result there is total burnout. In physics terms, your energy doesn't convert into work. It dissipates as waste heat.
So it's just thermodynamic weight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are heating up the room, but you are moving the car forward. And eventually you destroy the engine.
Which brings us to the second trap people fall into, right? Give up the drive.
Yeah, that's a dangerous one.
You hit the wall enough times, you get tired, and you try to just switch off your ambition. You tell yourself, I'm just going to collect my paycheck, keep my head down, and stop caring.
But attempting to suppress a fundamental drive to create leads to what Kunis calls coherence collapse.
Coherence collapse. That sounds bad.
It is, because you cannot simply turn off your core hardware. If that negentropic energy cannot flow outward to organize the world, and you try to cap it, it triggers an internal civil war.
So the energy turns inward.
Exactly. It turns inward and starts dismantling the system itself. This often manifests as severe anxiety, depression, or self-sabotage. This system literally attacks itself out of sheer boredom.
Wow. Okay, then there is the third response, which, sounds reasonable on paper. Wait passively. Just sit around, bide your time, and hope the market changes or your boss gets fired.
But passivity is impossible for a T-plus architecture. A growth-oriented mind does not have an idle mode.
Right.
The energy is constantly being generated, and it absolutely must go somewhere.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because
Yeah.
it feels like a paradox. If I am listening to this and I realize my current environment is blocked, like I can't push through without burning out,
Right.
and I can't give up without starting an internal civil war that destroys my mental health,
Yes.
and I can't just wait around passively because my engine physically cannot idle, aren't we completely out of options here?
It really feels that way.
You are essentially telling me I have a car that can't stop and it's facing an immovable brick wall.
Well, what's fascinating here is that physics actually solves this paradox through the relativity principle.
The relativity principle. Okay, how does that work?
So syntropy, that net creation of organized complexity we talked about, is always defined relative to a boundary. Normally, we draw that boundary around our external environment.
Like you write a book or you launch a company or build a community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are creating complexity out there in the world.
The output goes out the ports.
But the core insight of the Spore strategy is this. If the external world cannot accept your growth-oriented output, the only valid domain left where syntropy is actually possible is your local system.
Wait, so the internal system?
Yes. If the outward ports are blocked, the energy must be redirected inward. You don't stop building, you just change the boundary of where the building happens.
Okay, so instead of trying to organize the world, you turn all that massive V8 power toward organizing yourself.
Exactly.
Let's look to nature to see how a system actually survives this inward pivot. Because biology has been dealing with hostile environments forever, right?
Oh, absolutely. Billions of years.
And it came up with a very specific mechanism for this.
Right. The biological concept is called cryptobiosis, or more commonly known as the spore state.
The spore state.
Yeah. When an organism faces an environment that becomes temporarily uninhabitable, like a severe drought, a deep freeze, or a massive spike in toxicity,
Right.
it doesn't keep trying harder to interact with that toxic environment.
Yeah.
It undergoes a profound phase change. It seals its ports and becomes a spore.
You know, I think we have a major misconception about what a spore actually is. Because when I think of a spore or a seed, I picture something that is essentially asleep.
Right, like it's just dormant.
Exactly. Just a dead little speck buried in the dirt, waiting passively for a drop of water to wake it up.
And that is a critical error in human perception. Kunis emphasizes this heavily. We think of spores as dormant because they appear static from the outside.
But they aren't.
No, that is only true relative to the external environment. Relative to the inside, a spore is a site of intense, high-rate metabolic activity. It was working furiously.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is repairing structural damage, protecting its DNA source code with extreme fidelity, and actively creating a pressure differential against external entropy. It is not waiting. It is densifying.
Densifying. I like that word. Let me play devil's advocate for the listener here, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Is going spore just a fancy scientific excuse for retreating into your shell and hiding from the world when things get tough?
I can see why people might think that.
Because I can easily hear someone using this to justify, like, quitting their job, moving into their parents' basement, playing video games for 12 hours a day, and claiming they are, quote-unquote, in spore mode.
There's a massive, measurable difference between retreat and spore mode.
Okay, what's the difference?
Retreat is passive. It's a state of decay. When you retreat, you lower your internal energy to match the dead entropic environment around you.
Right.
Your coherence decreases. You get sloppy, unmotivated, and disorganized.
Like that internal civil war we mentioned earlier.
Precisely. Spore mode, which is localized syntropy, is the exact opposite. You are maximizing your internal order against the external entropy.
So you're not just chilling out.
No, not at all. Retreat is passive waiting. Spore is active concentration. You seal your ports to the outside world only so you can relentlessly organize and optimize your internal substrate.
Okay, let's bring this down to earth then. If the spore is intensely active on the inside, how do we translate that biological process into practical human actions?
Good question.
Like, what does densifying actually look like for you, the listener, in your day-to-day life?
Well, Kunis reminds us that the physics of organizing systems are scale invariant.
Meaning they apply at every level.
Exactly. The physical laws governing the creation of order in a massive corporate logistics network are the exact same laws governing the creation of order in your own nervous system.
It is just a different substrate.
Yes. He divides this internal work into two categories. First is biological syntropy, or substrate engineering.
Which means taking care of the physical hardware.
Right. Activities like rigorous martial arts, strength training, movement practice, or even, optimizing your nutrition and sleep.
No, I see.
You are converting a low-resolution biological vessel into a high-coherence, high-precision instrument. You are actively fighting the entropy of aging and physical decay.
That makes total sense.
A mastered body is a state of incredibly high internal order. Imposing that discipline on your physical hardware is real thermodynamic work. It burns off that excess V8 energy.
Wow, okay. And the second category he mentions is noetic syntropy, or constitutional engineering.
Yes, exactly.
This is the mind, right? The activities here are deep study, daily meditation, rigorous journaling, and basically resolving internal psychological conflicts.
Yep, that's it.
You are taking a fragmented, easily distracted, self-sabotaging mind and turning it into a highly coherent polity. You are aligning all your internal goals so that you don't have like one part of your brain wanting to build a business and another part terrified of failure, constantly pulling the emergency brake.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. I love looking at noetic syntropy like defragmenting a computer's hard drive.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Think about it. The meditating monk or the person spending 4 hours deeply studying a complex subject with their phone turned off isn't doing nothing.
No, it's absolutely not.
To the outside world, they look completely static, just like the biological spore. But internally, they are eliminating all this friction. They are taking scattered, disorganized data and restructuring it so the system runs perfectly.
And by defragmenting that drive, by ending the internal contradictions that slow you down, you create what physics calls a negentropic potential.
A negentropic potential. So like charging a battery.
Exactly. You are charging an internal battery.
Mm-hmm.
The substrate happens to be your biological tissue and your neural pathways rather than an external bridge or a software product. But the actual work of creating order is identical.
Okay.
The entire point of doing this is to be ready to unleash that massive potential the moment external conditions finally change.
But practically speaking, do you have to do this entirely alone?
Not necessarily, no.
Because if I decide my industry is broken and I need to retract my energy, am I supposed to just become an isolated monk, defragmenting my brain in a room by myself? Spores can actually scale, right?
Yes, they can.
I think Kunis calls this the fractal spore.
He does. The boundary of your spore absolutely does not have to stop at your own skin.
Mm.
The governing rule is that you draw your boundary at the largest scale you can successfully manage with high coherence.
Okay, so it depends on what you can control.
Right. Kunis breaks this down into 3 operational levels. Level 1 is the individual spore.
Right.
If you look around your immediate environment and cannot find a single other person aligned with your standard of growth, you must seal your own boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You become a sovereign state of one.
The solo practitioner, the hermit phase.
Exactly. Level 2 is the dyadic spore. This occurs when you find a partner, romantic, business, or otherwise, who shares your intense growth orientation.
Whole partnership.
Yeah, the relationship itself becomes the spore. Together you build a microculture of absolute truth, incredibly high standards, and mutual development.
I really like that.
It becomes a 2-person pocket of high coherence where the chaos and mediocrity of the outside world simply do not apply.
And then it scales up to level 3, the tribal spore. I look at this as a small, highly aligned group, like a research cell, a martial arts dojo, an intentional community, or even a startup operating in stealth mode.
Yes, those are perfect examples.
Kunis uses historical examples, right? Like monasteries preserving classical knowledge through the chaos of the Dark Ages.
He does, yeah.
Or the Manhattan Project isolating the world's top physics talent out in the desert. They sealed their ports to maintain internal order because the broader environment was just too hostile.
The overarching strategy here is finding your foundry. You must continuously retract your boundary until you find a defensible perimeter.
A defensible perimeter.
Yes. This is crucial for the listener to understand. If your extended family or your 50-person company is too chaotic, too drama-filled, or too entropic to govern toward growth, you must retract.
Okay, so you pull back.
Right. If you can't govern a community, govern a relationship. If you can't govern a relationship, you govern yourself. You only draw the line where you can absolutely guarantee high coherence.
Which brings us to, honestly, the hardest part of this whole strategy.
Well, for sure.
Because it is so unbelievably easy to trick yourself into thinking you are in productive spore mode when you are actually just hiding, We really need a rigorous diagnostic test. We
Mm.
need to ensure we are actually densifying and not just slowly dying in our own comfortable little bubble.
And Kunis provides a fantastic litmus test for this, structured around 4 diagnostic questions.
Let's go through them.
The first question is foundational. Is the environment actually hostile, or are you just depleted?
Wow, okay. That distinction changes everything.
It does. If the external ports are structurally blocked, meaning no matter how good your work is, the market, the culture, or the specific company will not accept it, that is a hostile environment.
And that's when you go into spore mode.
Exactly. That warrants the Spore strategy. But if the ports are open and weighing and you're just too exhausted or burned out to interface with them, you aren't facing a hostile environment.
You are simply depleted.
Right. You don't need a multi-year cryptobiotic strategy. You just need to take a vacation, rest, and get back to work.
Okay, let's assume the environment really is hostile. Question 2 challenges your internal activity. As we discussed, spore mode is actually harder than normal life, not easier.
Much harder, yes.
So if you are isolated and you're sleeping in, skipping your workouts, doom scrolling, and building less mental capacity, you fail the test. That is simply decay.
Precisely. And question 3 tests your signal detection.
Signal detection.
Yeah. Are you actively watching the environment for changed conditions, ready to bloom the second the weather turns? Or have you made dormancy your dominant identity?
Oh, that's a trap.
It is. If you settled into being isolated forever and stopped scanning for opportunities, you've slipped back into decay.
You know, I was thinking about this while reading the essay, and it reminds me of the difference between a bear actively hibernating versus a bear that is just sick in a cave.
Oh, that's a really good way to visualize it.
Because a healthy hibernating bear has a slowed but highly regulated metabolism. It is actively managing its internal fat stores to survive the brutal winter so it can emerge incredibly strong in the spring.
Right.
But a sick bear is just wasting away, losing its muscle mass and its coherence. Both look like they are just sleeping in a cave from the outside, but biologically they are doing opposite things.
That maps perfectly to the 4th diagnostic question. Is your coherence measurably rising?
Right. You have to be brutally honest with yourself.
You really do. Look at your physical capacity, your cognitive clarity, and your emotional regulation. Are those metrics actually going up month over month?
And if they aren't?
If they are degrading, you are the sick bear. You are dying, not densifying. Valid spore mode requires that your internal order is constantly increasing and your radar for new opportunities remains online. You must be biologically ready to bloom.
So assuming you pull this off, you retract your boundaries, you do the grueling internal work of substrate and constitutional engineering, and you maintain this high-pressure, highly coherent spore state.
Yes.
How does it end? Like, what is the ultimate payoff for the listener after putting in years of this internal work?
Well, Kunis outlines 2 possible outcomes. Let's start with scenario A, which he calls the rain never comes.
Okay.
In this scenario, you eventually succumb to entropy. The external conditions never improve during your lifetime, the culture never shifts, the industry never recovers, and your ports remain blocked forever.
I have to push back on Kunis here, honestly. I mean, I spend years, maybe decades, in spore mode, optimizing my mind and my body, and the environment never changes, and I just fade out. That sounds incredibly bleak.
It does sound bleak.
Why even bother putting in all that effort?
Well, it sounds bleak until you compare it to the alternative. Kunis argues the spore was still the mathematically optimal strategy.
Oh, so...
Because if you had tried to bloom in a desert, if you had tried to force your growth on a world that wouldn't accept it, you would have died in days from the burnout of thermodynamic waste.
Right, heating up the room.
Exactly. By becoming a spore, you bought yourself years, maybe decades, of non-zero probability. You maximized your surface area for luck.
Oh, I see.
You achieved what he calls a higher enderness, total integrated aliveness than the seed that sprouted too early and rotted in the sun.
Total integrated aliveness.
Yeah. The victory condition of the spore isn't necessarily, did I change the world? The victory condition is, did I maintain the pattern against the gradient? You kept the flame of organized complexity alive as long as physically possible.
Okay, that makes sense. You basically refuse to let the chaos win on your watch.
Exactly.
But then there is scenario B, which is obviously the one we are all aiming for. The context changes.
Yes, the rain finally comes.
Right. Maybe a radically new technology drops that bypasses the gatekeepers. A new tribe forms. Or a massive crisis breaks the deadlock in your stagnant industry.
Exactly. Suddenly the external ports open wide. And because you preserved your coherence in the spore state, You get to execute what Kunis brilliantly calls temporal arbitrage.
Temporal arbitrage. Well, arbitrage is usually about buying low in one market and selling high in another.
Exactly. But here you are trading across time. You have successfully transported highly organized complexity across a massive gap of entropy.
So while everyone else was giving up.
Right. During the dark times, while everyone else was complaining and decaying, you were quietly charging your batteries. You built up immense value.
Oh.
When the window finally opens, you cash it in. You bloom instantly, expanding into that newly open space with full, overwhelming power.
But how do you know when that window opens? Like, what is the exit condition that tells you it's time to stop defragmenting and start building outward again?
The exit condition happens by signal, not by a calendar date.
Yeah.
And absolutely never by guilt.
Not by guilt.
No, you don't leave spore mode because society makes you feel guilty that you aren't out there, hustling.
Right.
For a T+ architecture, the growth drive is deeply hardwired. If you have been densifying and building that internal pressure, you will literally blow the hatch the moment a valid external target appears.
It just happens automatically.
It manifests as an irrepressible hunger to build.
Mm.
A growth-oriented system naturally gets bored of inner optimization once the internal system is fully optimized. Your hardware will automatically wake you up when the maintenance cycle is done and the environment is ready.
That is fascinating. Let's synthesize this incredible journey for everyone listening.
Sounds good.
When the world flat out rejects your energy, don't force it to the point of burnout. Heating up the room does nothing but destroy your engine.
Right.
And whatever you do, don't give up and let the internal civil war tear your mind apart. Instead, seal your ports. Do the genuinely hard, unglamorous internal work of substrate and constitutional engineering. Train your physical body. Defragment your mind. Find your defensible perimeter, whether that is a small group chat of highly aligned friends, a trusted partner, or just your own mind, and become what Kunis calls a sleeper foundry.
Yes, sleeper foundry.
Become a high-performance engine running at maximum internal efficiency, waiting for the context to change. So I want you to think about your own life right now. Where are you constantly hitting a brick wall?
That's the key question.
And more importantly, where might you need to consciously retract your boundaries today, pull your energy inward, and build an iron shell of hyper-localized syntropy around the few things you can actually control?
And as you contemplate building that iron shell, consider this broader perspective. If our current physical institutions and cultural environments are often bogged down, bureaucratic, and hostile to deep growth-oriented building, how might the decentralized digital landscapes we inhabit act as virtual spores?
Oh, like the internet itself.
Yeah. Exactly. Could the internet itself be functioning as a global cryptobiotic shell for ideas? Millions of us, retracting our physical boundaries, but connecting in these highly coherent digital dojos.
Preserving the pattern and collectively waiting for the physical world season to turn.
That is a phenomenal thought to leave on. A global network of sleeper foundries just waiting for the rain.
Yeah.
Until that season turns for you, keep that internal engine defragmented. Keep your batteries charged, and don't let the friction of a blocked world wear you down. Keep densifying. Catch you on the next deep dive.